My name is Jessica, 32 years old, and I stood frozen at the edge of that elegant restaurant table. The anniversary celebration for my parents swirled around me, champagne glasses clinking. But all I could focus on was my brother Alexander smirking up at me. After years as the family outsider, I thought tonight would be different. My marketing firm had just landed a client bigger than any my family had ever seen. But as I clutched my purse, I realized some things never change. Before I tell you how my brother's smug remark changed everything, drop a comment letting me know if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories about finding your worth. Growing up as the middle child between Alexander and Sophia shaped my entire identity. Alexander, for years older, was groomed from childhood to take over Campbell Family Restaurants, the moderately successful chain my parents built from nothing. Sophia, 3 years younger, was the baby. Perpetually forgiven for any misstep because of her sunny disposition and willingness to follow every family tradition without question. I was different. Not rebellious exactly, but questioning. While Alexander shadowed our father through restaurant kitchens from age 10, and Sophia helped our mother with hosting duties from her teen years, I buried myself in business journals and marketing case studies. I saw the flaws in our family business model, the outdated approaches to customer acquisition, the inefficiencies in their supply chain. The restaurant business is about heart, not textbooks, my father Brian would say dismissively whenever I offered suggestions. Alexander understands that. My decision to study business administration instead of culinary arts was treated like high treason. The day I announced my college choice at dinner, my father pushed away his plate and left the table. My mother Patricia patted my hand with a pained smile. Maybe you could minor in hospitality management? Just to keep your options open. Alexander capitalized on my departure from the family script. Someone has to preserve what Mom and Dad built, he'd say, shooting me looks across holiday dinners. Some of us understand loyalty. The pattern of exclusion started subtly. Family vacations planned while I was in final exams, making it impossible for me to attend. Business discussions that abruptly shifted to talk about weather when I entered the room. Group photos where I was positioned at the edge, easy to crop out. By the time I graduated with honors, the distance had calcified. I wasn't invited to the opening of their 5th location. When I sent a congratulatory arrangement, the flowers were acknowledged with a generic text from my mother's assistant. Despite everything, I built my own path. Starting as a junior marketer at a small agency, I worked 14-hour days, saved every penny, and eventually launched Campbell Marketing Strategies. Yes, I kept the family name. Perhaps a subconscious desire to prove I could succeed with it on my own terms. The first 2 years were brutal. Ramen noodles and sleepless nights. Clients who paid late or sometimes not at all. Cold calls that ended with hang-ups. Through it all, my friend Heather remained my support system. We met in college, and unlike my blood relatives, she never missed a milestone. Your family is nuts for not seeing your talent. She'd tell me over cheap wine in my studio apartment. Their loss. 6 years of grinding and finally, breakthrough. My innovative campaign for a local brewery went viral, catching the attention of Westfield Enterprises, a corporate giant with fingers in everything from luxury hotels to award-winning restaurants that made my family's chain look like fast food. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of being told I didn't understand the restaurant business, I was now handling marketing for establishments that had earned Michelin stars. My parents had never achieved even one. The call from my mother came 3 days after the Westfield contract was announced in the business section of our city paper. Jessica, dear. Her voice artificially bright. We're having a little dinner for our anniversary next Friday. 35 years, can you believe it? We'd love for you to join us. No congratulations about Westfield. No questions about how I'd landed such a prestigious client. Just a little dinner mentioned as though we'd spoken last week instead of 4 months ago. I called Heather immediately after. They're only inviting you because you're successful now, she said bluntly. You know that, right? Maybe, I conceded. staring at the ceiling of my newly purchased condo. Or maybe they're finally ready to see me as part of the family again. Heather's silence spoke volumes. "You think I shouldn't go," I said. "I think you should go in with your eyes wide open," she replied carefully. "And an exit strategy if things go south." That night, I pulled out the family photo album I'd kept despite everything. Pictures of birthdays, Christmases, school events. In the early ones, my parents looked at me with the same pride they showed Alexander and Sophia. When had that changed? When had I become the family problem rather than just another family member? The formal email invitation arrived the next morning, addressed to my work account rather than my personal email. Another small slight. It was for Bellini's, the most expensive restaurant in the city. The place where my parents celebrated every major milestone. The place I hadn't been invited to in 7 years. The email was signed the Campbell family rather than with any individual names. As if I wasn't part of that collective. As if I needed to be formally invited by an entity I should, by birth, already belong to. I hovered over the delete button before accepting with a brief, looking forward to it. Professional. Detached. Protecting myself while leaving the door open for something better. The email sat in my inbox like a challenge. Formal black text against white, the time and date of my parents' anniversary dinner staring back at me. I almost deleted it several times over the next few days. What did I have to prove? Why put myself through another evening of subtle digs and exclusion? I scheduled an emergency session with my therapist Lauren, a calm, practical woman who had guided me through the worst of my family anxiety over the past 3 years. "What are you hoping will happen at this dinner?" she asked, her notepad balanced on her knee. "That they'll finally see me." "Really see me," I admitted. "That my success will translate into, I don't know, respect? Inclusion. And if that doesn't happen?" I twisted my hands in my lap. "Then maybe it's closure. Maybe I need to see them all together one more time to accept that this relationship might never be what I want it to be." Lauren nodded. "Those are valid reasons to go. But let's set some boundaries before you do." We spent the next 40 minutes establishing my emotional guardrails. I wouldn't stay if direct insults occurred. I would maintain financial boundaries regardless of pressure. I would acknowledge my accomplishments without apologizing for my different path. "Remember," Lauren said as our session ended, "their reactions reflect their limitations, not your worth." I repeated this to myself like a mantra over the next week as I prepared. The outfit selection became a 3-day ordeal. Too casual would make it seem like I didn't care. Too formal might appear as though I was trying too hard. I finally settled on a navy blue dress that hit just below the knee. Professional enough to remind them of my success, but not so businesslike that it created additional distance. I paired it with the pearl earrings my grandmother had left specifically to me. A small connection to family history that always gave me courage. The gift was another challenge. Something personal would likely be dismissed, but something generic would confirm their belief that I didn't really know them anymore. After much deliberation, I commissioned a custom wine bottle with their wedding date and a recreation of their first restaurant logo etched in gold. Thoughtful, relevant to their lives, but not overly sentimental. 3 days before the dinner, my sister Sophia texted me directly. "So glad you're coming Friday. Mom and Dad have something special planned." My heart lifted momentarily before caution tempered my hope. "Special how?" I texted back. "Not sure exactly. Dad and Alexander have been having lots of meetings. Something about expansion and legacy." Legacy. The word that had excluded me for years. The family business legacy that apparently could only be carried by the son who stayed rather than the daughter who left. The evening of the dinner arrived with unseasonable rain, forcing me to navigate puddles and heels as I made my way from the parking lot to Bellini's gleaming entrance. I sat in my car for 10 extra minutes, gripping the steering wheel, seriously contemplating driving away. My phone rang, breaking the spiral of anxiety. Elizabeth, my newest account manager, was calling with news that our proposal for Jordan Hospitality Group had been accepted. Another major client, another validation of my business approach. They specifically mentioned your analysis of their customer demographic was what won them over, Elizabeth said excitedly. This is huge, Jessica. I thanked her, promised we'd celebrate properly on Monday, and ended the call feeling strangely fortified. This was exactly what I needed before facing my family. A reminder that outside their narrow view, I was valued. I was successful. I was enough. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my purse, the carefully wrapped gift, and stepped into the rain. Whatever awaited me inside Bellini's, I would face it as the accomplished woman I had become, not the perpetual outsider my family had made me feel like for so long. Bellini's hadn't changed in the 7 years since I'd last been here. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over white tablecloths. The subtle scent of garlic and truffle oil hung in the air. Piano music provided a sophisticated backdrop to muted conversations. The host, a tall man with an impeccable suit and practiced smile, greeted me with professional warmth until I gave my name. You must be Alexander Campbell's sister, he said, his expression shifting to recognition. Not Jessica Campbell of Campbell Marketing Strategies. Not Jessica Campbell in her own right. Alexander Campbell's sister. The familiar reduction of my identity stung despite my preparation. Jessica Campbell, I corrected gently but firmly. Here for the Campbell anniversary dinner. He nodded without acknowledging the correction and led me through the dining room. I could see my family before they noticed me. My parents seated at the head of a large rectangular table. My father Brian looking distinguished with his silver hair, my mother Patricia elegant in burgundy. Alexander sat to my father's right, his wife Grace beside him. My sister Sophia and her husband James occupied the other side beside my mother. The empty chair was noticeably separated from the group, positioned at the far end of the table. Almost an afterthought. I swallowed hard, squared my shoulders, and approached. My mother saw me first, rising with practiced grace. Jessica, darling, you made it. Air kisses beside each cheek. Careful not to smudge her makeup. That color does nothing for your complexion, but the cut is flattering at least. My father half stood, offering a brief nod before immediately turning back to Alexander. As I was saying about the location in Westbrook, Sophia, at least, seemed genuinely pleased to see me. She jumped up and gave me a real hug. Jess, I've missed you. Her enthusiasm earned her a sharp look from our mother, and she quickly subdued her greeting, sliding back into her seat beside James, who offered a friendly but reserved wave. Alexander rose last, his 6'2" frame intentionally intimidating as he approached. The prodigal sister returns, he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. He hugged me stiffly, his cologne expensive and overwhelming. We were just discussing the new location. Probably boring for you, since it's actual restaurant business, not just advertising. His wife Grace followed with a practiced smile. Jessica, what a surprise. Alexander mentioned you might be too busy with your little marketing company to attend. Her emphasis on little was subtle but unmistakable. That dress is so practical. Very you. I placed my gift on the designated table, already stacked with elaborately wrapped packages. My mother barely glanced at it. How thoughtful, whatever it is. We'll open everything later at home. The waiter arrived, an older Italian man named Antonio with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. Welcome, signora, he said, pulling out my chair. May I bring you something to drink? Before I could answer, Alexander interrupted. She'll have the house white. Jessica never did develop a sophisticated palate for wine. He laughed as if sharing an inside joke with Antonio, who didn't join in. Actually, I said calmly, I'd like the Barolo Reserve, please. Alexander's eyebrows shot up. Expensive taste on a small business budget. I smiled tightly. Westfield Enterprises sends excellent gift baskets to their marketing partners. I've learned a lot about fine wines this past year. At the mention of Westfield, a brief, uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My father cleared his throat. Well, let's have a toast before we order. To 35 years. Glasses were raised. To 35 years, everyone echoed. I noticed my mother's eyes didn't meet my father's during the toast. Interesting. And to family legacy, Alexander added pointedly. To those who honor tradition. Another round of glass clinking, excluding me without being explicit enough to call out. As we studied menus, the conversation naturally turned to business. Or perhaps not naturally, but intentionally steered there by Alexander. The supply chain issues have been a nightmare, my father complained. Especially with the FBC regulations changing again. We might need to adjust the POS integration at all locations. Alexander added. The back-end MRP system is showing inconsistencies. It was restaurant industry jargon deliberately employed to exclude me. Acronyms and terms I wouldn't know because I hadn't stayed in the family business. I focused on my menu instead of engaging with the transparent tactic. Our waiter Antonio returned for our orders, starting with my mother and working his way around the table. When he reached me, he smiled kindly. And for you, Signora? The sea base, please, I said, with the side of seasonal vegetables. Excellent choice, he replied with what seemed like genuine approval. Our chef prepares it beautifully. It was a small moment of normal human interaction, but in the context of the evening, it felt like finding water in a desert. Antonio seemed to be the only person in the restaurant who saw me as a person rather than an extension of family politics. As he departed, Alexander leaned across the table. So, Jessica, tell us about this Westfield account. Small potatoes compared to expanding a restaurant empire, but we're all curious how you managed to land it. The condescension was clear, but I recognized an opportunity to assert my place. Actually, Westfield is the largest client my firm has handled yet, but not by much. We've been working with several national brands this past year. National? My father asked, a hint of genuine surprise breaking through his indifference. Yes, I replied, warming to the topic. Our digital conversion strategy increased Highland Brewery's sales by 32% last quarter. That campaign actually won an industry award last month. How nice. My mother said dismissively. Sophia, tell Jessica about James's promotion. And just like that, the conversation was redirected. My professional achievements dismissed as casually as swatting away a fly. I listened politely as Sophia detailed her husband's new middle management position at an insurance company, a job that apparently warranted 5 full minutes of discussion, while my National Marketing Award didn't deserve even 5 seconds. The pattern continued through appetizers. Any topic I introduced was quickly redirected. Questions about my life were superficial and immediately followed by someone else's supposedly more interesting story. I was physically at the table but might as well have been dining in another restaurant entirely. When I excused myself to visit the restroom, I took a moment to lean against the marble sink. Breathing deeply, Lauren's voice echoed in my head. Their reactions reflect their limitations, not your worth. I reapplied my lipstick, straightened my shoulders, and returned to the battlefield disguised as a family dinner. What I found when I returned stopped me mid-stride. While I was gone, everyone had shifted seats, closing the already small gap where my chair had been. The empty chair now stood awkwardly apart from the main group, almost like a deliberate exile. I stood there, purse clutched in suddenly sweaty hands, unsure how to proceed. This was beyond subtle exclusion. This was public rejection. I stood frozen beside the rearranged table, painfully aware of nearby diners glancing curiously in my direction. The gap between my chair and the rest of my family had widened from inches to feet. An unmistakable statement. Alexander looked up, his expression a perfect blend of innocence and malice. Is something wrong, Jessica? You look confused. The seating seems to have changed while I was gone, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. He smirked, gesturing to the isolated chair with a sweep of his hand. This table's for family only, he said, pointing to a small empty table in the corner. We thought you might be more comfortable over there. More your style, independent as you are. The shock hit me physically, a wave of heat climbing from my chest to my hairline. The restaurant sounds faded beneath the sudden rushing in my ears. Around the table, reactions varied, My father studied his wine glass, avoiding eye contact. My mother pursed her lips in what might have been disapproval but made no move to intervene. Grace covered a laugh with a delicate cough. Sophia looked mortified but silent. James stared intently at his plate. No one defended me. No one objected to this public humiliation. In that crystallizing moment, I saw my family with perfect clarity. This wasn't new behavior. Just the most blatant version of what they'd been doing for years. The excluded middle child had become the excluded adult. The pattern had never changed, only evolved. I felt my face burning. Aware that nearby diners had heard Alexander's comment. My instinct screamed to run, to escape the humiliation. But something deeper held me in place. Dignity, perhaps. Or simply the exhaustion of running from this family dynamic for so many years. I see, I said finally, my voice coming from somewhere distant and calm. If that's what you prefer. I gathered my purse and water glass, leaving the rest of my settings behind. With deliberate movements, I relocated to the small corner table. Setting down my belongings with steady hands that belied the earthquake happening inside me. From this new vantage point, I could see my family's table perfectly. Though they had effectively placed me out of their sightlines. The corner table normally accommodated 2 people but had been set for 1. Had this been planned all along? Had Antonio been instructed before I even arrived? The thought made my stomach clench. I pulled out my phone as a shield, pretending to check emails while I regulated my breathing. In, out. Slow and steady. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you cry. Lauren's techniques for anxiety management played on loop in my mind. A gentle presence beside me broke through the spiral. Antonio stood there, a fresh bread basket in hand. "Signora, some fresh bread for you," he said quietly. His eyes conveyed something his professional demeanor couldn't say aloud. Understanding. Perhaps even apology. "Thank you, Antonio," I said, genuinely grateful for this small kindness. "It is nothing," he replied. "I will bring your sea base directly to you when it is ready. The chef is preparing it with special attention." From my isolated position, I watched my family's dinner unfold like a theater production viewed from the wings. Their animated conversations. The inside jokes, the seamless interactions that come from regular contact. My father's proud smile as Alexander detailed plans for the next restaurant location. My mother's practiced laugh at James's polite jokes. Had they always been this performative? This concerned with appearances? Or was I only seeing it clearly now from the outside? I noticed things I might have missed from within the dynamic. How my father checked his phone whenever my mother spoke for more than 30 seconds. How Alexander subtly dominated every conversation, redirecting topics to himself whenever attention strayed. How Sophia's genuine warmth was repeatedly tamped down by disapproving glances from our mother. They weren't happy, I realized. They were comfortable in their established patterns, but not happy. The revelation didn't bring satisfaction, only a strange, sad clarity. My sea base arrived, beautifully plated and perfectly cooked. Chef Mario prepared this himself, Antonio said, a small act of rebellion in his preferential treatment of the exiled family member. "Please thank him for me," I replied. The meal itself was exquisite, but I tasted little of it, mechanically cutting small pieces while continuing my observation of the family tableau. During dessert, I overheard fragments about an upcoming family trip to Tuscany. Another event I clearly wasn't being invited to join. My father mentioned something about celebrating the expansion properly, with just us, while looking directly at Alexander. Alexander stood to make a toast, champagne flute held high. "To the Campbell legacy," he proclaimed. "To 35 years of family tradition, and to carrying that tradition forward for generations to come." Everyone clinked glasses enthusiastically. No one looked in my direction. When dessert arrived at the main table, they received a spectacular shared platter of Italian pastries with 35, written in chocolate sauce and edible gold leaf. Minutes later, Antonio brought me a single cannoli on a plain white plate. Another visual reminder of my separate status. The accumulated small humiliations continued throughout the meal. My water glass remained unfilled when the busboy refilled everyone else's. When I attempted to join a conversation during a brief trip back to retrieve my forgotten napkin, Alexander smoothly talked over me as if I hadn't spoken. When photographs were taken to commemorate the evening, no one suggested I should join. By the time the meal concluded, I felt emptied out. Not sad anymore, not even angry. Just vacant, as if something long overdue had finally been excised. And then came the moment that changed everything. The main table had fallen into that satisfied lull that follows an excellent meal. Coffee cups emptied, dessert plates cleared, only wine glasses remained. My parents sat back in their chairs, the picture of contentment after their anniversary celebration. Alexander had his arm draped casually around Grace's shoulders, the magnanimous heir apparent. The successful evening was winding down perfectly. Antonio approached their table with a discreet black leather folder. The bill. "Thank you, Antonio," my father said without reaching for it. "But that should go to my daughter." He gestured vaguely in my direction without actually looking at me. Alexander smirked. "Yes, give that to my sister," he said loudly. "She's handling it tonight." Antonio hesitated, confusion briefly crossing his professional demeanor. "It's our gift to Mom and Dad," Alexander explained to the table at large, though this was the first I was hearing of it. "Jessica and I are splitting the bill for their anniversary. Right, Jess?" Every head turned toward my corner. Every face wore a different expression, my father's entitled expectation, my mother's bland assumption, Alexander's malicious glee, Grace's smug satisfaction, Sophia's embarrassed discomfort, James's studied neutrality. Antonio looked genuinely uncomfortable as he brought the leather folder to my small corner table. "I apologize, Signora," he murmured, so only I could hear. I was not informed of this arrangement. "Neither was I," I replied quietly, taking the folder from him. I opened it slowly, conscious of 6 pairs of eyes watching from the main table. The amount made my breath catch. 4 figures. Enough to make a significant dent in my monthly budget. I noticed charges for bottles of wine I hadn't shared, appetizers I hadn't tasted, and expensive champagne toast that had explicitly excluded me. "Everything in order?" Alexander called out, his voice carrying clearly across the restaurant. "It shouldn't be a problem with that big Westfield contract you were bragging about." My mother laughed lightly. "Alexander, don't tease." "But Jessica, darling, this is nothing compared to what you must be earning now. Such a lovely gift for our anniversary." A pattern emerged from memory. My parents forgetting their wallets when we had lunch 3 years ago, leaving me with a surprise bill. Alexander asking me to spot him for an expensive dinner celebrating his promotion, never repaying me. The family emergency that turned out to be a broken refrigerator in their vacation home, with an expectation that I would contribute equally to the replacement despite never using the property. Financial exploitation packaged as family obligation. I sat perfectly still, aware of a strange calm settling over me. Not the numbness of defeat, but the clarity of recognition. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about a lifetime of being valued only for what I could provide, whether emotional validation or financial contribution. I looked up and accidentally caught Antonio's eye as he served coffee to a nearby table. His expression held no judgment, only a quiet understanding that somehow steadied me. A peculiar smile formed on my lips. Not the tight, people-pleasing smile I usually wore around family, but something different. Something that felt like the first expression of a new version of myself. At that precise moment, my phone lit up with an email notification. I glanced down automatically and saw the subject line. Contract approved, Jordan Hospitality Group. My second major client this month confirmed. The largest contract my company had ever secured. In another time, I might have immediately shared this news, still seeking the validation my family had always withheld. But in this moment of clarity, I realized their approval or disapproval had become irrelevant. Their opinion of my worth had nothing to do with my actual value. I looked across the restaurant at my family table, still watching expectantly, waiting for me to fulfill the role they had assigned without my consent. The dutiful daughter, picking up the tab while being deemed unworthy of a seat at their table. For the first time, I saw them not as intimidating figures holding power over my self-worth, but simply as people. Flawed, insecure people whose behavior reflected their limitations, not mine. My options crystallized with surprising clarity. I could 1. Pay the bill silently, continuing the pattern. 2. Create a scene, validating their view of me as emotionally unstable. 3. Leave without paying, burning bridges permanently. 4. Or something else entirely. Something that reclaimed my power without lowering myself to their level. I reached for my phone and typed a quick text to Heather. Family ambushed me with huge dinner bill. Time to stand up for myself. Her response was immediate. About damn time. You've got this. Those 4 words gave me the final push I needed. I took a deep breath, placed my credit card back in my wallet, and stood up from my corner exile. The bill folder in my hand felt like both a burden and a weapon as I walked deliberately toward the main table. My family's conversation halted abruptly as I approached. 6 faces turned toward me with expressions ranging from confusion to smug anticipation. They expected either compliance or explosion. I would give them neither. I approached the main table with measured steps, the leather bill folder held loosely in my hand. My heart pounded, but my voice remained steady when I spoke. I think there's been a misunderstanding about tonight's bill, I said, addressing the entire table but making eye contact with my father. I wasn't informed that I would be paying for this dinner. Alexander snorted. Come on, Jessica. We all know you can afford it with your big new clients. Consider it your contribution to the family for once. My contribution to the family, I repeated, the words hanging in the air. That's an interesting perspective. I placed the bill folder on the table and pulled out the chair that had previously been mine, seating myself despite not being invited back. The symbolic act of reclaiming space felt surprisingly powerful. Let me share my perspective, I continued, my voice clear and controlled. For years, I've watched this family celebrate together, plan together, and support each other. From a distance. Because despite being born into this family, I've never truly been included in it. My father shifted uncomfortably. Jessica, this isn't the place for one of your dramatic episodes. This isn't drama, Dad. This is honesty. Something our family has never been particularly good at. I turned to Alexander. An hour ago, you said, and I quote, "This table's for family only." You physically separated me from all of you, and everyone at this table allowed it. You're being oversensitive, my mother interjected. Alexander was just joking. Was he joking 7 years ago when I wasn't invited to the opening of the Westbrook location? Was it a joke when my college graduation dinner was forgotten because the new restaurant menu tasting was scheduled the same night? Were the family vacations I learned about through Facebook also jokes? The table fell silent. I've spent years thinking I needed to earn my place in this family, I continued. That if I was successful enough, accomplished enough, you would finally see me as worthy of inclusion. Tonight has shown me how wrong that approach was. I gestured to the bill. This isn't the first time. 3 years ago, you both forgot your wallets at lunch, leaving me with a $400 bill. Alexander, you still haven't repaid the $1,000 I loaned you for your anniversary dinner with Grace. The emergency home repair fund I contributed to equally, despite never using the vacation house. It's a pattern. Alexander's face had turned an interesting shade of red. If you're so successful, why are you counting pennies? Family helps family. Family helps family, I agreed. But in healthy families, that help goes both ways. When was the last time any of you offered me help, support, or even basic inclusion? My father cleared his throat. Jessica, if this is about money. It's not about money, I interrupted, surprising even myself with my boldness. It's about respect. It's about finally recognizing that I won't accept being treated as an ATM while simultaneously being told I'm not good enough for a seat at the family table. I looked at each face around the table. I've built a successful marketing firm without any support from this family. In fact, I've succeeded despite active discouragement. The Westfield account you've been dismissing all night? They chose my firm over 20 others, including several national agencies. The contract I just received notification about during dessert represents the largest client my company has ever signed. I turned specifically to Alexander. You can joke about my little marketing company all you want, but the truth is, I've built something valuable entirely on my own. Can you say the same about your position in the family business? A heavy silence fell over the table. From the corner of my eye, I saw Antonio hovering nearby. Professionally neutral, but clearly monitoring the situation. So here's what's going to happen with this bill, I said, tapping the leather folder. I'm willing to pay for my own meal, which comes to approximately $80, including my drink and dessert. The remaining $1,200 will need to be covered by the rest of you. $1,200. My mother gasped, finally looking at the total herself. Yes, that includes the 3 bottles of Cristal that Alexander ordered, the special truffle appetizers, and the anniversary dessert platter. None of which I was invited to share, despite apparently being expected to fund. I stood up, smoothing my dress. Going forward, I'm establishing new boundaries. I will no longer accept last-minute financial demands disguised as family obligations. I will no longer sit at separate tables or accept public humiliation. And I will no longer measure my worth by the approval of people who have consistently shown they don't value me. Alexander half rose from his seat. You can't just walk away from family responsibilities. Watch me, I replied calmly. And perhaps reflect on the irony of demanding family loyalty from the person you exiled to a corner table 20 minutes ago. My mother reached for my arm. Jessica, you're making a scene. People are watching. People were also watching when Alexander separated me from this table, I pointed out. That didn't seem to concern you then. I noticed Sophia watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Not anger, not exactly support, but something like respect? Jess, she said quietly. I'm sorry. I should have said something earlier. I nodded acknowledgement of her apology, but remained focused on the boundary I was establishing. I've left $80 cash on my table for my portion of the meal. The rest is your responsibility. My father, face flushed with either embarrassment or anger, pulled out his wallet. Fine. If you want to be difficult about this. It's not difficult to expect basic respect, Dad. It's the minimum. Alexander wasn't finished. If this is how you want to play it, don't expect to be included in family events going forward. I couldn't help the small laugh that escaped. Was I included before? Really included? Because from where I've been standing, or rather, sitting alone in corners, it hasn't felt that way for a very long time. I picked up my purse, suddenly lighter in ways that had nothing to do with its physical weight. I hope you enjoyed your anniversary dinner. 35 years is quite an achievement. I wish you both happiness. The sincerity in my voice seemed to catch my parents off guard. Perhaps they had expected rage or tears, not this calm assertion of boundaries. If you ever decide you'd like a relationship based on mutual respect, my door is open, I added. But I won't walk through yours again just to be seated at a separate table. With that, I turned and walked through the restaurant, head high, conscious of curious glances from nearby diners who had undoubtedly overheard portions of our conversation. Antonio caught my eye as I passed, giving me a subtle nod that felt like solidarity. Outside, the night air felt cleansing against my flushed skin. I made it to my car before the first tears came, not tears of hurt but of release. Years of seeking approval from people incapable of giving it, years of contorting myself to fit into spaces too small for my spirit, years of accepting scraps of attention while being told I should be grateful for them. I sat in my car for nearly 30 minutes, processing what had just happened. My phone buzzed several times with texts I wasn't ready to read. Finally, I started the engine and drove home, windows down despite the cool night air, feeling as though I was physically leaving behind more than just a restaurant. That night, doubts crept in as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Had I overreacted? Burned bridges that could never be rebuilt? Rejected my family as thoroughly as I had felt rejected by them? But morning brought clarity. I woke to find messages from both my parents and Alexander. Variations on the theme of my ungratefulness and selfishness. But there was also a message from Sophia, I'm proud of you. Call me when you're ready to talk. That small validation from the sister I'd always felt closest to despite our differences confirmed what my heart already knew. I hadn't destroyed family relationships last night. I had simply stopped accepting their dysfunctional version and opened the door to potentially healthier ones. For the first time in years, I felt not the sting of exclusion, but the freedom of choice. My family could choose to respect my boundaries or not. Either way, I would no longer measure my worth by their assessment. 6 months after the restaurant confrontation, I sat in my expanded office space, surrounded by the tangible results of professional success. Campbell Marketing Strategies had doubled in size, now occupying the entire floor instead of just half. The Westfield and Jordan accounts had opened doors I'd once only dreamed of walking through. But the physical expansion paled in comparison to the personal growth those months had brought. 3 weeks after the dinner, Sophia had called. "Can we meet for coffee?" Just us. We met at a small cafe halfway between our homes. The initial awkwardness dissolved quickly as she spoke. "I should have said something that night at Bellini's," she admitted. "I've been thinking about it ever since. About all the times I watched them exclude you and said nothing." "You were the youngest," I said, not excusing but acknowledging the family dynamic. "It's hard to go against established patterns." "Still," she insisted. I knew it was wrong. I just didn't have your courage. That coffee date became a weekly tradition. Sometimes discussing our parents and Alexander, but increasingly focusing on our own lives, interests, and experiences. The sister relationship I'd always longed for began to take shape, built on mutual respect rather than obligatory family connection. My parents had taken a different approach. 2 weeks after the confrontation, a formal letter arrived at my office. Not a personal note, but a business letter on my father's stationery. "While we find your behavior at the anniversary dinner regrettable, we are willing to move forward if you apologize appropriately. Family harmony requires compromise." No acknowledgement of their role. No recognition of the patterns I'd identified. Just an expectation that I would once again contort myself to fit their definition of acceptable. I responded with equal formality. "I appreciate your willingness to move forward. When you're ready to discuss mutual respect and healthy boundaries, I remain open to conversation." That exchange set the tone for our limited communication over the following months. Occasional text messages, formal birthday cards, surface-level inquiries about my well-being that never delved into genuine connection. Alexander remained openly hostile, making disparaging comments about me to extended family members, some of whom uncomfortably relayed his words. I stopped asking them to tell me, finding peace in not knowing what he said about me in my absence. Lauren, my therapist, helped navigate this new terrain. "Family estrangement exists on a spectrum," she explained during one session. "Total cutoff is one end, unhealthy enmeshment is the other. You're finding your place somewhere in the middle, and that's perfectly valid." With her guidance, I focused on building connections that nourished rather than depleted. Heather and I strengthened our friendship through weekend hikes and honest conversations. My small circle expanded to include Elizabeth from work, who became both colleague and friend. Nathan, a client who became something more, entered my life with refreshing directness and emotional intelligence. Together, they formed what I came to think of as my chosen family. People who celebrated my successes without jealousy, supported me through challenges without keeping score, and valued me for exactly who I was, not who they needed me to be. The first holiday season after the confrontation brought its challenges. An invitation to my parents' home arrived with careful wording about putting aside differences for family tradition. After thoughtful consideration and a lengthy session with Lauren, I declined, choosing instead to host a gathering for friends who had nowhere else to go. The contrast between that warm, laughter-filled evening and the tense, performance-driven family holidays of my past couldn't have been more striking. No one keeping mental tallies of slights. No undercurrents of competition. Just genuine connection and celebration. An unexpected letter arrived in early spring, forwarded through Bellini's management. From Antonio, the waiter who had witnessed my family's dynamics with such quiet understanding. Dear Miss Campbell, he wrote in careful handwriting. I hope you will forgive this unconventional contact. I have worked at Bellini's for 32 years and have observed many family dynamics across my tables. The dignity with which you handled yourself that evening stayed with me. It reminded me of my own journey with family expectations and the courage it takes to define yourself outside of others' limitations. I simply wanted to say, brava. His words brought unexpected tears. Validation from a stranger who had witnessed one of my most vulnerable moments without judgment, only compassion. 2 months later, I unexpectedly encountered my parents at a charity gala I was attending with Nathan. The initial awkwardness gave way to superficial pleasantries. For the first time, I noticed my mother's nervousness around me, my father's uncertainty about how to engage without his usual authority. The power dynamic had shifted, not because I had seized control, but because I had stepped outside the game entirely. Your company is doing well, my father asked, making an effort I wouldn't have expected. Very well, I replied simply, neither diminishing my success nor weaponizing it. That's good, he said, appearing genuinely unsure how to proceed without our established script. We should catch up sometime. I'd like that, I said, meaning it. When you're ready. The brief exchange wasn't reconciliation, but it was something new. Something possible. Through building my business, I discovered that the boundaries I'd established in my personal life strengthened my professional one as well. I no longer accepted clients who devalued my expertise. I stopped undercharging to prove my worth. I built a company culture that celebrated collaboration over competition, learning over perfectionism. You've changed, Margaret. A new friend who knew nothing of my family history observed over lunch one day. Not just since I met you, but even in these past months. You take up more space now. Not physically, but energetically. You speak with more certainty. Her observation startled me, but reflection proved its accuracy. The woman who had stood frozen at the edge of that family table, hoping for inclusion, no longer existed. In her place was someone who knew her value didn't depend on others' recognition of it. The true revelation came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Sitting in my office, reviewing quarterly projections with my team, I was struck by a wave of genuine contentment. Not happiness tied to achievement or external validation, but a quiet, steady certainty that I was exactly where I belonged, doing exactly what I was meant to do, surrounded by people who saw and valued me authentically. In that moment, I understood the most profound lesson of the past year. Self-worth isn't granted by others' approval. It's cultivated through honoring your own boundaries, values, and truth. My family had spent years convincing me I was always slightly less than enough. The reality was that I had always been whole, whether they could see it or not. Looking toward the future now brings excitement rather than anxiety. My relationship with Sophia continues to deepen. Small, tentative steps with my parents may or may not lead to meaningful reconnection. Alexander remains distant, but his power to wound has diminished to almost nothing. What matters more is the life I'm building on my own terms. A thriving business that reflects my values. Relationships based on mutual respect. A growing comfort with standing in my truth. Even when it's uncomfortable. The table I was excluded from that night at Bellini's? It turned out to be the wrong table entirely. The one I'm building now has room for everyone who approaches with respect, love, and authenticity. Including me. Especially me. So, if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, if you've ever dimmed your light to make others comfortable, if you've ever accepted less than you deserve in exchange for conditional belonging, I hope my story reminds you of one essential truth. You are worthy of respect simply because you exist. And anyone who can't offer that doesn't deserve a seat at your table. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who didn't value you properly? What boundaries have you set that changed your relationships for the better? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're enough, exactly as they are. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the family that truly matters is sometimes the one you create, not just the one you're born into.